Let me tell you something that will bother you, and I mean that sincerely, because the things that bother you are the things worth thinking about. There is a very popular idea floating around, and it has been floating around for decades now, dressed up in the respectable clothes of mathematics, and it goes something like this. The galaxy is enormous. There are hundreds of billions of stars. A good fraction of those stars have planets. A fraction of those planets are in the right temperature zone, and therefore, the argument concludes, the universe must be absolutely lousy with intelligent life. We just have not found it yet. People say this with a warm smile, as though the cosmos is a party that has already started and we are simply late to arrive. I want to pull that smile apart because the mathematics underneath it is being used dishonestly, and dishonest mathematics, no matter how comforting, is still wrong. Frank Drake wrote his equation on a blackboard in 1961, and it was a genuinely useful thing to do. It organized our ignorance. It said, here are the variables we do not know, and if we could estimate them, we might guess how many civilizations are out there right now, trying to reach us. What happened next was the problem. People started filling in those variables with optimistic numbers, not because they had data, but because they wanted the answer to be large. They wanted company. And wanting company is a very human thing, but it is a catastrophically poor substitute for evidence. Here is what the equation does not capture. It does not capture the mechanical brutality of what it actually takes for dead matter to become alive. It does not capture the terrifying patience of entropy. It does not capture the geometric cruelty of the speed of light. And when you put those things back into the picture, the warm smile fades, and what you are left with is something far more unsettling and, I would argue, far more interesting. Imagine something with me. You are standing inside a chemical factory, not a small one, a factory the size of a galaxy, stretching 100,000 light years from one wall to the other, and it has been running, churning, exploding, freezing for 14 billion years. The machinery inside this factory is violent and chaotic. Chemicals collide and separate at random. Temperatures swing between millions of degrees and absolute zero within the space of a few light years. The whole structure is threaded with radiation that can shred molecular bonds before they have a chance to do anything interesting. Now, occasionally, purely by accident, a completely random arrangement of chemicals in one small corner of this factory produces a tiny spark, a microscopic, accidental flame. It lasts for a single microsecond, maybe less, and then the churning violence of the environment snuffs it out, and the factory goes on grinding without noticing. That spark is life. That is what we are talking about. Not a destiny, not an inevitable product of a universe that was set up to generate observers, an accident. A statistical fluctuation so improbable that the honest response when you encounter one is not to expect another, but to stand in complete astonishment that this one happened at all. And now I want to build on this picture, because the problem is not just the improbability of the spark. The problem operates at three distinct levels of physics, and each level is, on its own, sufficient to make you deeply skeptical that we share this factory with anyone else. The first level is the thermodynamics of abiogenesis, and I want you to understand what thermodynamics is actually saying here, because it is not being polite. The second law of thermodynamics is one of the most ironclad statements in all of physics. It says that the total entropy of a closed system never decreases. Entropy, loosely, is disorder. Things fall apart. Concentrated arrangements of matter tend to spread out. Structures tend to dissolve. This is not a tendency or a preference. It is a law with the same status as the conservation of energy. The universe, left to itself, moves toward maximum disorder, toward a cold, uniform, featureless soup of particles, moving at the same temperature in every direction. Life is a direct, local violation of this tendency. A living cell is an extraordinarily organized arrangement of molecules. It takes raw chemical inputs from its environment, runs them through a set of incredibly specific molecular machines, extracts energy, builds copies of itself, and expels the thermodynamic waste outward. It creates local order by generating greater disorder in its surroundings. But the creation and maintenance of this local order requires a set of initial conditions that are genuinely terrifying in their specificity. You need the right atoms, obviously. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur. in the right concentrations, in the same place, at the same time. You need liquid water, which requires a narrow band of temperature and pressure. You need an energy source that is continuous, but not so intense that it destroys the very molecules it is supposed to drive. You need a chemical environment with a pH that does not denature proteins before they can fold. You need the spontaneous formation of a membrane to separate the inside chemistry from the outside chaos. You need that membrane to be selectively permeable in precisely the right way. And you need all of this to happen simultaneously in the same microscopic volume. And even if all of that happens, you have not yet gotten life. You have gotten an interesting puddle. Life requires self-replication. It requires a molecule, or a system of molecules, capable of copying itself with enough fidelity to preserve information across generations, but with enough error to allow change over time. The origin of that first self-replicating system is the most profound unsolved problem in all of science, and the honest answer is that we do not know how it happened even here, on the one planet where we know it did happen. The majority of the cosmos is made of environments where these conditions are not even remotely approximated. The interstellar medium is a vacuum so thin that chemical reactions are vanishingly rare. The surfaces of rocky bodies without atmospheres are bathed in ultraviolet and ionizing radiation. Gas giants are made of the right atoms, but in conditions that shred complex molecules. The universe is, by volume, overwhelmingly composed of environments that are aggressively hostile to the kind of organized chemistry that life requires. The fraction of the cosmos that even permits the question of abiogenesis to be asked is microscopic. And the probability that abiogenesis occurs even in permissive environments is, based on the only data point we have, unknown but apparently not high. The second level of the problem is the relationship between simple life and intelligence, and this is where human vanity really starts to cost us our clarity. There is an assumption baked into the popular version of the fermiparadox, and it is an assumption so deeply held that people barely notice it. The assumption is that once you get simple microbial life, intelligence is eventually inevitable. That evolution, given enough time and enough generations, tends to produce complex nervous systems, and complex nervous systems tend to produce tools, and tools tend to produce radio telescopes. This is not supported by the evidence. The evidence suggests the opposite. Life on Earth is estimated to have originated approximately 3.8 billion years ago. For most of that time, for roughly the first 3 billion years, the entire biosphere consisted of single-celled organisms. Bacteria, archaea, microbes with no nucleus, no complex internal machinery, no multicellularity, no differentiation, just cells doing cell things for 3 billion years. The transition to complex multicellular life, the Cambrian explosion of body plans, occurred roughly 500 million years ago. The emergence of tool-using hominids capable of abstract reasoning and symbolic communication occurred within the last few million years. On the 14 billion year timescale of the universe, and the 4.5 billion year timescale of the Earth, the existence of beings capable of writing equations on blackboards represents a razor-thin slice of time, so narrow it is almost invisible. And this is on the planet where it happened. The planet where, by definition, every filter was passed. The planet that survived. The planet that did not get sterilized by a sufficiently large asteroid impact, of which there were many candidates. The planet that maintained liquid water through the various Snowball Earth episodes. The planet whose star remained stable enough and whose magnetic field remained strong enough to deflect most of the lethal radiation. There are physicists and biologists who argue, with genuine seriousness, that the transition from simple prokaryotic life to complex eukaryotic life, which required the endosymbiotic merger of two separate cell lineages, was so improbable that it may have occurred only once in the observable universe. Once. In every star system, around every planet, in 14 billion years of chemistry. And if that is even approximately correct, then the silence we hear when we point our radio telescopes at the sky is not surprising. It is mathematically required. But suppose we are wrong about that. Suppose multicellular life is more common than we think. Suppose intelligence arises more readily than the fossil record on Earth suggests. We still have not escaped the problem, because the third level is absolute, and it is built into the geometry of spacetime itself. The speed of light is approximately 300 million meters per second. This is not a technological limitation. It is not something we will engineer around with sufficiently advanced propulsion. It is a fundamental feature of the structure of reality, a consequence of the geometry of four-dimensional spacetime, enforced by every experiment ever conducted in the history of physics. Nothing with mass can reach it. Information cannot exceed it. Causality depends on it. The nearest star system to our own Alpha Centauri is approximately 4.2 light-years away. This means that a signal, traveling at the absolute maximum speed permitted by the laws of physics, takes 4.2 years to make the one-way trip. The Milky Way galaxy is approximately 100,000 light-years in diameter. A signal crossing the galaxy takes 100,000 years, minimum, one way. The nearest large galaxy to our own, Andromeda, is approximately 2.5 million light-years away. The observable universe extends roughly 46 billion light-years in every direction, a consequence of cosmic expansion that began 13.8 billion years ago. Now think about what this means in the context of time. Even if another civilization existed somewhere in the Milky Way, the signal they sent when their civilization was at its peak might be arriving here now, carrying the voice of a species that has been extinct for 10,000 years. We would be receiving a ghost, a frozen record of a moment that no longer exists in any meaningful sense. The geometry of the universe does not permit a galactic community. It does not permit real-time communication across stellar distances. It does not permit physical travel between stars on any timescale relevant to a civilization. The universe is not, in this sense, a single connected place. It is an enormous collection of isolated volumes, each separated from the others by distances so vast that the light travel time dwarfs the entire span of recorded human history millions of times over. Even if every one of the improbable filters I described earlier were passed, the geometry of spacetime would still guarantee that each civilization lives and dies in complete isolation, separated from every other mind in the cosmos by a wall of light travel time that cannot be climbed, cannot be tunneled through, and cannot be argued with.